All right, today we are cracking the code of life itself. We're diving into the blueprint that makes you, well, you. We're talking all about genetics and heredity, the science that answers one of the most basic questions we all have.
You've probably thought about this, right? You look in the mirror and see a little bit of your mom, a little bit of your dad. Why is that? The answer is this amazing, beautiful, and incredibly precise process of biological inheritance that's been passed down for generations.
So let's start there by trying to unravel this whole riddle of resemblance. We're going to look at the fundamental way traits get passed on, which really sets the stage for everything else we're about to get into.
And at the very heart of it all is this one word, heredity. It's the biological process, the nuts and bolts of how genetic information gets transmitted. A good way to think about it is like a family recipe book that gets passed down, making sure those key ingredients from both parents are in there. This is really the bedrock of the entire science of genetics. For centuries, heredity was just a mystery. People knew it happened, but they had no idea how. But that all started to change back in the 19th century when one guy started seeing the patterns, the hidden rules behind it all.
And that guy was Gregor Johann Mendel. They call him the father of genetics for a very, very good reason. He was the first person to bring math and super careful observation into biology, and he totally changed our understanding of inheritance from just guesswork into an actual predictive science.
And you know what the key to all his work was? Simplicity. Mendel was a priest over in Austria, and he used the common garden pea for all his experiments. And that was a genius move. Peas grow fast, and they have these really easy-to-see traits, which let him systematically unlock the secrets of how this all works. From all those pea plant experiments, Mendel came up with 3 fundamental laws. And these laws prove that inheritance isn't just a random blending of features. No, it actually follows these super precise, predictable rules. It was the first time anyone showed that heredity could be understood with almost mathematical accuracy, a total game changer.
Okay, so Mendel gave us the rulebook, but what's the actual code that's being passed down? Now let's dive into the physical blueprint itself, this incredible molecule that holds the instructions for every single living thing.
That blueprint is called the genome. It is the complete instruction manual for an organism, and it's all written in the language of DNA. Get this, almost every single cell in your body has a full copy of this entire manual tucked inside. And the scale of this manual, it's just staggering. The human genome has over 3 billion DNA base pairs. That's billion with a B. It is a massive library of information all packed into a space so small you can't even see it.
Now, our understanding of this molecule definitely didn't happen overnight. It all started way back in 1869 when Friedrich Miescher first isolated it. But the giant leap forward came almost 100 years later, in 1953, when Watson and Crick showed the world their iconic double helix model. That's when we finally saw the structure of the code itself.
But here's a super important point. DNA doesn't work alone. It's got a partner called RNA. Think of it like this. DNA is the master blueprint, kept safe in the main office, the cell's nucleus. RNA is like the messenger who makes a copy of a specific plan, takes it out of the office, and uses it to actually build the proteins that make up our bodies.
So how in the world do you fit 3 billion letters of code inside a tiny cell? Well, you package it brilliantly. Our DNA is wound up super tightly into these structures we call chromosomes. These are like the neatly organized books in our genetic library. And for us humans, that number is constant and very precise. We have 23 pairs of chromosomes, which means 46 in total. 22 of those pairs are called autosomes. They're the same for everybody. And that 23rd pair, those are the sex chromosomes, and they determine if you're biologically female, which is XX, or male, XY.
Okay, so we've got this system of precise rules and perfectly packaged code. It all sounds very neat and tidy, right? But what if I told you that parts of this code aren't fixed in place? What if some parts could jump?
The official scientific name for these is transposable elements. They're basically sequences of DNA that can literally move from one spot in the genome to a completely different one. They're the wild cards in our genetic deck.
But they have a much cooler nickname, jumping genes. And this incredible discovery was made by a scientist named Barbara McClintock, who actually won a Nobel Prize for her work. She first spotted them by watching the colors of corn kernels change. And their impact is absolutely enormous. You're not going to believe this, but about half of your DNA is made of these jumping genes.
They're a huge driver of evolution because they create all this genetic variety. But their movement can also be risky. Sometimes they cause diseases like hemophilia or even cancer. They're both a creative and a destructive force all at once.
Okay, to wrap this all up, let's learn the basic vocabulary. If you can get these key terms down, you'll be able to speak the language of genetics and really understand how this whole intricate code works.
First up, we've got genotype versus phenotype. It's pretty simple, really. Your genotype is your complete genetic code, all the instructions written in your DNA. Your phenotype is the result of those instructions, the stuff you can actually see, like your eye color or how tall you are. So what are these instructions made of? The basic units are genes. Think of a gene as a single recipe for one specific thing. An allele, then, is just a different version of that recipe. So the gene for eye color has alleles for blue, brown, green. You get the idea.
Now, not all alleles are treated equally. A dominant allele is one that will always show up if it's there. But a recessive allele is a little bit shy. It only gets to show its face if you inherit 2 copies of it, and there's no dominant allele there to boss it around.
And finally, these last 2 terms just describe the combination of alleles you've got. If you have 2 identical alleles for a trait, let's say 2 for brown eyes, you are homozygous for that trait. If you have 2 different ones, say 1 for brown and 1 for blue, then you're heterozygous. Simple as that.
So what we've seen is that our genetic code is this system of incredibly accurate rules. But at the same time, it's alive with constant change. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to end on. With forces like jumping genes constantly rewriting our DNA, what is our blueprint even going to look like in 1,000 years? That's a question for the future to answer. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.